The stars had never seemed so cold. Commander Daniel Carter stood at the observation window of the colony ship. It knew dawn and watched the endless darkness stretch before him. Behind him, 4 million humans waited in the cramped holds of 200 ships, the last survivors of a world that no longer existed. Earth was gone. A gamma ray burst from a distant dying star had stripped away the atmosphere in seconds, boiled the oceans in minutes, and turned the cradle of humanity into a lifeless rock. The Exodus fleet had been humanity's desperate gamble. Launched just 3 years before the disaster when scientists first detected the coming doom. Now, it drifted through space with failing engines, dwindling food supplies, and no destination. Daniel turned away from the window and walked through the corridors of his ship. He passed families huddled together in spaces meant for cargo. He passed children who had never known grass or rain or the feeling of wind on their faces. He passed old men and women who remembered Earth and wept silently in their sleep. His executive officer, a young woman named Lisa Chen, fell into step beside him. Her face was pale and drawn like everyone else on the fleet. "Sir," she said quietly, "engineering reports that Reactor 3 is failing. We have maybe 2 weeks of power left." After that, she did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Daniel nodded slowly. 2 weeks. 2 weeks until the lights went out and the cold crept in. 2 weeks until humanity's story ended in the darkness between stars. "Have we received any responses to our distress signals?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Nothing, sir. We have been broadcasting for 6 months. Either there's no one out there, or no one cares." Daniel said nothing. What was there to say? He had led these people into the void with promises of a new beginning, and now he would lead them to their graves. That night, sat alone in his quarters and composed a final message. A record of humanity's existence to be broadcast into space in hopes that someone someday might find it and know that they had lived, that they had loved, that they had dreamed. He was still writing when the alarm sounded. Daniel rushed to the bridge, his heart pounding. An alarm could mean anything: a hull breach, a reactor failure, an asteroid collision. Any of these would simply speed up what was already inevitable. But when he reached the bridge, his crew was not panicking. They were staring at the main view screen with expressions of pure shock. Ships. Dozens of ships. Emerging from some kind of energy portal that glowed soft blue against the darkness. They were unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. Elegant. Organic shapes that seemed grown rather than built, with hulls that shimmered like mother of pearl. "Sir," Lisa whispered, "they are hailing us." Daniel swallowed hard. First contact. Humanity's first encounter with another intelligent species, and it was happening when they were at their weakest, their most vulnerable. "Put it through," he said. The view screen flickered, and Daniel found himself looking at a being that took his breath away. It was insectoid, roughly humanoid in shape, but covered in iridescent chitin that caught the light like a prism. Its eyes were compound, made of thousands of tiny facets that shimmered like opals, and from its back spread a pair of delicate wings. Gossamer thin and beautiful beyond words, the creature spoke, though the sounds it made were clicks and whistles. Somehow Daniel understood. Later, he would learn that the Valorians had technology that could translate any language, could bridge any gap in communication. In that moment, he only knew that he was hearing words of kindness when he had expected words of threat. "Strangers," the being said, "we have heard your cries across the void. We have seen your suffering. We are the Valorians, and we have come to help." Daniel felt his legs weaken. He gripped the arm of his command chair to keep from falling. "Why?" he asked. It was the only word he could manage. The Valorian tilted its head, a gesture that somehow conveyed gentle confusion. "Because you are in pain," it said simply. "Because you are dying. Because we can help, and so we must." Is there another reason needed? The Valorian fleet guided the Exodus ships through a portal to a star system that humanity would later name Sanctuary. It was beautiful. A yellow sun, much like Earth's lost star, with 7 planets and dozens of moons. The 4th planet was already home to the Valorians, a world of crystal spires and floating gardens. But the largest moon of the fifth planet was empty, waiting. "It is yours," the Valorian leader told Daniel. Her name, he would learn, was High Matriarch Cylindra, and she was the closest thing the Valorians had to a ruler, though they thought of her more as a caretaker. "We have been preparing it for many years, hoping we would someday find neighbors among the stars. We did not expect to find neighbors in such need. The moon had atmosphere, water, soil ready for planting. The Valorians provided seeds, technology, medicine. They asked for nothing in return." Daniel spent long hours speaking with Cylindra, trying to understand. His people came from a world of nations and borders, of trade and negotiation, of debts and obligations. The idea of giving so much for nothing was foreign to him. "You do not understand," Cylindra said, her wings fluttering in what Daniel was learning to recognize as amusement. "We do not give to receive. We give because giving is what life does. A flower does not bargain with the bee. The sun does not demand payment for its warmth. Life helps life. This is the way of things." "But we have nothing to offer you," Daniel said. "We are refugees. We are broken." Cylindra reached out and touched his hand. Her fingers were delicate, almost fragile, but her touch was warm. "You are alive," she said. "You carry within you the dreams and hopes and memories of your world. You have stories to tell and songs to sing and children to raise. Is that nothing? We think it is everything." Daniel felt tears running down his face. He had not cried since the day Earth died. "We will repay this debt," he said. "I do not know how. I do not know when. But someday we will find a way to repay what you have given us." Cylindra's compound eyes glittered. "There is no debt between friends, Daniel Carter. But if it brings you comfort to think of it so, then let it be so. Perhaps one day, many years from now, you will find someone who needs help as you needed help today. Perhaps you will remember us then, and you will help them as we helped you. That would make us happy." Daniel nodded slowly. He understood now. This was not charity. This was not pity. This was something deeper, something that his people had perhaps forgotten in their long history of war and competition. "We will remember," he said. "We will teach our children, and they will teach their children. For as long as humanity exists, we will remember the Valorians and what you did for us today." Cylindra's wings spread wide, and for a moment, Daniel thought she looked like an angel from the old stories. "Then we are content," she said. "Welcome to your new home, humanity. May you find peace here. May you find joy. And may you always remember that you are not alone in the universe." That night, for the first time in months, Daniel Carter slept without nightmares. And in the holds of 200 ships, 4 million humans began to dream again. The debt was born, and humanity would never forget. 300 years had passed since the Exodus. The moon that the Valorians had given to humanity was now called New Terra, and it was home to 900 million people. Cities rose where once there had been only empty plains. Farms stretched across continents. Children played in parks, never knowing that their ancestors had once drifted through the void, waiting to die, but they knew the story. Every human knew the story. It was taught in schools, spoken in temples, celebrated on Founding Day. The story of the Valorians, the gentle beings who had saved humanity when no one else would. The story of the debt that could never truly be repaid, only passed forward. Humanity had spread beyond New Terra now. They had colonized dozens of worlds, built trading outposts, formed alliances with hundreds of species. The United Human Confederacy was a respected power in the galactic community, known for their diplomacy, their fairness, and their long memory. And through it all, the Valorians remained their closest friends. Ambassador Samuel Hayes had served as humanity's representative to the Valorian Collective for 15 years. He was 53 years old, with gray at his temples and laugh lines around his eyes. He had learned to speak the Valorian language without a translator, could read their poetry in its original form, and understood their culture better than any other human alive. His children had grown up on Valoria Prime, playing with Valorian young in the crystal gardens that floated above the clouds. His wife had studied Valorian music and could play. Their haunting melodies on instruments she had built with her own hands. The Valorians were not just humanity's saviors. They were family. That was why the news hit Samuel like a physical blow. He was in his office when the alert came through, reading a collection of Valorian love poems that his friend matriarch Yulendra had given him for his birthday. The emergency channel activated with a harsh buzz, and suddenly his screen was filled with data that made his blood run cold. The Kreth, Dominion, had entered Valorian space. Samuel knew of the Kreth. Everyone did. They were the terror of the galaxy, a reptilian species that had been conquering their way across the stars for 10,000 years. Their empire spanned 3,000 worlds, built on the bones of Spec. Is they had exterminated or enslaved. They respected only strength, understood only fear, and showed mercy to no one. And now they had come to Valoria. Samuel rushed to the High Matriarch's chamber, his heart pounding. The floating palace was in chaos, with Valorians rushing through the corridors, their wings fluttering with distress. They were not a species built for crisis. They had no military, no weapons, no experience with violence. In all their history, they'd never needed such things. He found Ulandra standing before a holographic display of the Kreth Armada. She was the great-great-granddaughter of Selendra, the matriarch who had saved humanity 3 centuries ago. She had the same gentle eyes, the same delicate wings, the same kind heart. And right now, that heart was breaking. "Samuel," she said when she saw him. Her voice was calm, but he could see the fear beneath it. "I am glad you are here. I wanted to say goodbye." "Goodbye?" Samuel moved to stand beside her, looking at the display. 12,000 warships, arranged in a formation that spoke of overwhelming force. "Yulendra, there must be something we can do." She turned her compound eyes toward him, and he saw acceptance there. "We have sent messages to every species we know. The responses are all the same. Sympathy, regret, and the truth that no one can stand against the Dominion." Her wings folded against her back. "We knew this day might come. We have always known. We simply hoped it would not come in our lifetime." "The Confederacy has ships," Samuel said urgently. "We have a navy. We can fight." Ulendra touched his hand gently. "Dear friend, the Confederacy has 800 warships. The Dominion has 12,000. You would throw away your lives for nothing." She looked back at the display. "We have 1 rotation to surrender. After that, they will begin the bombardment. Our cities will burn. Our people will die. And the Valorian Collective will become another trophy in the Dominion's long history of conquest." Samuel felt tears burning in his eyes. He thought of his children, of the Valorian friends they had grown up with. He thought of the crystal gardens and the floating palaces and the gentle beings who had given humanity everything. "There must be something," he whispered. Yulendra shook her head. "I have ordered the archivists to preserve what they can. Our music, our art, our stories. We will send them into deep space, hoping someone will find them someday. That is all we can do now." She looked at him with infinite sadness. "You should go, Samuel. Take your family and return to human space. There is no reason for you to die with us." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then he straightened his spine and met her eyes. "Hi, Matriarch," he said, and his voice was steady despite the fear in his heart. "I need to contact Earth." 1 hour later, Samuel stood before a holographic display of the Human Confederacy's ruling council. 12 faces looked back at him. Presidents, prime ministers, admirals, and diplomats who together governed the fate of humanity. "Ambassador Hayes," said Chancellor Maria Santos, the council's leader, "we have received your report. The situation is grave. It is worse than grave, Chancellor. It is extinction. The Valorians have no way to defend themselves. If we do not act, they will be destroyed." "What would you have us do?" Admiral Christopher Blake leaned forward, his face grim. "We have 800 warships. The Dominion has 12,000. Even if we sent everything we have, it would not be enough." Samuel took a deep breath. 300 years ago, the Valorians saved our species. They gave us everything when we had nothing. They asked for nothing in return. But we made a promise. Commander Daniel Carter knelt before High Matriarch Cylindra and swore that humanity would never forget. That one day we would repay our debt. He paused, looking at each face in turn. That day has come. Chancellor Santos was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice carried the weight of 3 centuries of gratitude. What do you need? Samuel told them. He told them about the alliances humanity had built over 300 years. The favors earned, the debts owed, the friendships forged. He told them about the Lithvari, the crystal beings who owed humanity for saving their homeworld from an asteroid. About the symbiont collective, whose living ships had been healed by human doctors during a plague. About the Calderan Empire, who had signed a mutual defense treaty with humanity. Just 50 years ago, he told them about every species humanity had ever helped. Every kindness they had ever shown. Every seed of friendship they had planted across the galaxy. We do not need to fight alone, he said. We just need to ask for help. Admiral Blake shook his head slowly. You are talking about calling in every favor we have. Every alliance, every treaty, every relationship we have built. If this fails, we lose everything anyway, Samuel said. But if it succeeds, we show the galaxy what happens when kindness is repaid. We show them that the Dominion can be stopped. We show them that there is another way. The council debated for 2 hours. Some argued that it was too risky. Others argued that the Valorians were not worth the cost. But in the end, it came down to a simple truth that every human understood. The Valorians had saved them. Now the Valorians needed saving. There was really only one choice. Chancellor Santos called for a vote. It was unanimous. Samuel returned to Wulandra's chamber as the messages began to go out. Hundreds of messages to hundreds of species across thousands of light years. Pleas for help. Reminders of old debts. Calls to arms. What have you done? Wulandra asked, her compound eyes fixed on him. Samuel smiled, and there was something fierce in that smile. High Matriarch, he said, we are about to find out if kindness truly is stronger than fear. I hope you are ready. Wulandra's wings trembled. Samuel, I do not understand. You will, he promised. Soon you will. And across the galaxy, ships began to move. Admiral Catherine Monroe had been waiting for this moment her entire life. She stood on the bridge of the UHS Remembrance, the flagship of the Human Confederacy's Navy, and watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. Around her, officers moved with quiet efficiency. Preparing for what would be the largest battle in human history, Catherine was 62 years old. She had gray hair cut short and practical, a face weathered by decades of command, and eyes that had seen too much death. She had served in the Navy for 40 years, rising from a young ensign to the highest rank her species could offer, and like every human who wore the uniform, she had sworn an oath. The oath had many parts. To defend humanity, to uphold the law, to protect the innocent, but there was one part that was different. One part that existed in no other military in the galaxy. The Valorians would never stand alone. Admiral, her tactical officer, Commander Eric Grant, reported from his station. The Kreth Armada has entered the inner system. 12,400 warships. They are broadcasting surrender demands on all channels. Catherine nodded slowly. What is their formation? Standard Dominion assault pattern. They are moving directly toward Valoria Prime. No scouts, no flanking groups. They do not expect resistance. Of course they did not. The Kreth had conquered 3,000 worlds. They had never faced a unified resistance. Every species they encountered had either surrendered or been destroyed. The idea that someone might actually fight back with any chance of winning was simply not part of their thinking. That was about to change. Out! Open a channel to their flagship, Catherine ordered. The view screen flickered, and the face of Kreth warlord Vraxus appeared. He was large for his species, with copper scales that gleamed like burnished metal and eyes that held no warmth, no empathy, no mercy. He had personally overseen the conquest of over 200 worlds. He was feared across the galaxy as the most ruthless commander the Dominion had produced in 1,000 years. He looked at Catherine with contempt. "Human," he said, his translator rendering his hissing speech into cold words. "You have one ship. I have 12,000. If you are here to negotiate surrender terms for the Valorians, you may speak. Otherwise, you are wasting the final moments of your existence." Catherine smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a predator who had been waiting in the shadows, watching its prey grow confident and careless. "Warlord Vraxis," she said. 300 years ago, the Valorian people saved humanity from extinction. They gave us everything they had. They asked for nothing in return. But we made a promise. We told them we would repay that debt. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. "Today, we keep our promise." Vraxis's scales rippled with what might have been amusement. "With one ship? You humans are even more foolish than the report suggested," Catherine said. "Not with one ship." She pressed a command on her chair. The space around the remembrance began to shimmer like heat rising from hot metal. Points of light appeared, small at first, then growing larger. They were jump portals. It's the same technology that had brought the Valorians to humanity's rescue 3 centuries ago. One portal opened, then 10, then 100. Then 1,000 ships poured through. Human battleships, massive vessels bristling with weapons. Human cruisers, fast and deadly. Human destroyers, carriers, support ships. The entire navy of the United Human Confederacy. Every ship that could fly. Every crew that could fight, but that was only the beginning. Behind the human ships came the crystalline dreadnoughts of the Lithvari, their hulls glittering like diamonds in the starlight. The Lithvari were beings of living crystal, and their ships were extensions of themselves, grown over centuries and nearly indestructible. Humanity had saved their homeworld from an asteroid 50 years ago, diverting the rock with a daring mission that had cost the lives of 200 human volunteers. The Lithvari had not. Forgotten behind the Lithvari came the living ships of the Symbiont Collective, vast organic vessels that pulsed with inner light. The Symbionts were a hive mind, billions of beings joined into a single consciousness. A plague had nearly destroyed them a century ago, spreading through their neural links like fire. Human doctors had found a cure, working day and night until they succeeded. The Symbionts had not forgotten. Behind the Symbionts came the fortress ships of the Caldoran Empire, massive constructs that looked like flying mountains. The Calderons were an ancient species, proud and powerful, who had signed a mutual defense treaty with humanity. They had called it an alliance of equals, though at the time, humanity's fleet had been a fraction of their own. The Calderons honored their treaties. More ships came. The sleek hunters of the Narix Federation, the converted asteroid ships of the mining guilds, the swift frigates of the trader clans, species that had never met each other, cultures that had never shared a word, beings that would have been strangers a week ago. They had one thing in common. At some point in the last 300 years, humanity had helped them. A rescue mission, a medical breakthrough, a trade agreement that had saved a struggling economy, a diplomatic intervention that had prevented a war. Humanity had planted seeds of kindness across the galaxy. Now, those seeds had grown into a forest. The tactical display updated continuously, struggling to keep track of the arriving ships. 20,000, 22,000, 23,000. Catherine watched Vraxis's face change. The contempt faded, replaced first by confusion, then by something that might have been the first fear the warlord had ever felt. "What is this?" he demanded. "What trickery is this?" "No trickery," Catherine said calmly. "Just a lesson. Would you like to learn it?" Vraxis said nothing. "The Valorians taught humanity something 300 years ago," Catherine continued. "They taught us that kindness is not weakness, that helping others without expecting reward creates bonds stronger than any treaty, that the species who conquers and takes, who builds their power on fear and cruelty, will find themselves alone when they finally meet something they cannot conquer." She stood, her hands clasped behind her back. You have built your empire on 10,000 years of terror. You have crushed hundreds of species beneath your heel. You have never shown mercy, never offered friendship, never given without taking more in return. She gestured at the tactical display at the vast fleet that now surrounded the Kreth Armada. And now you face the result. You are alone. We are together. That is the difference between us. Roxas's scales had turned pale, the color draining from them as he realized the truth. He was not facing one species defending another. He was facing half the galaxy, united by something he had never understood and could never possess. This changes nothing, he hissed, but his voice had lost its confidence. We are Kreth. We do not surrender. We do not retreat. We will destroy you all. Catherine shook her head slowly. No, Warlord. You will not. She closed the channel. On the bridge of the Remembrance, her officers waited in tense silence. Commander Grant looked up from his tactical station. Admiral, the Kreth are powering weapons. They are preparing to attack. Catherine nodded. She had expected nothing else. The Kreth did not know how to surrender. They had built their entire civilization on the idea that they were superior, that they could never be defeated. Even now, facing impossible odds, they would rather die than admit they had been wrong. All ships, she said, her voice carrying across the fleet through 1,000 communication channels. This is Admiral Monroe. The Kreth have chosen to fight. We will give them the battle they want. She paused, looking at the tactical display. At the 12,000 enemy ships that were about to face 23,000 defenders. Today, we fight for the Valorians. We fight for the debt we owe them. We fight for every species that ever showed kindness to a stranger and received kindness in return. She drew a deep breath. Today, we show the galaxy what compassion looks like when it has teeth. All ships engage. The fleet surged forward, and the battle began. On the surface of Valoria Prime, High Matriarch Eulindra stood in her palace and watched the sky fill with light. She had prepared herself for death, for the end of her people, for the darkness that would follow. Instead, she watched salvation arrive. Beside her, Ambassador Samuel Hayes put a gentle hand on her shoulder. His eyes were wet with tears. They came, she whispered. They all came. We made a promise, he said simply. Humans keep their promises. Above them, the light of 1,000. Weapons fire turned night into day. The debt was being repaid. The Battle of Valorian. Space would be remembered for 1,000 years, Lieutenant Commander. Eric Grant pulled his fighter into a tight spiral, dodging a stream of plasma fire from a Kreth destroyer. His cockpit was filled with the sound of warning alarms and the chatter of 100 different species coordinating their attacks. He was part of Phoenix Squadron, a mixed unit that included human pilots, Lithvari, crystal singers who controlled their ships through thought alone, and 3 Nerix hunters whose reflexes were so fast they could dodge laser fire. 6 months ago, they had been strangers. Now, they were family. Phoenix 3, you have 2 bandits on your tail, Eric called out, banking hard to bring his weapons to bear. I see them, Phoenix leader. That was Crystalline. The Lithvari pilot, whose real name was a series of harmonic tones that human vocal cords could not produce. Nerix 4, can you assist? Already moving. The Nerix pilot, a being with 4 arms and eyes that could see in every direction at once, dove through the chaos with impossible grace. 2 quick shots, and the Kreth fighters became expanding clouds of debris. This was what the Dominion had never understood. They fought as individuals, each ship seeking glory for itself. Each captain trying to prove their worth through personal kills. They had never learned to work together because they had never needed to. They had always been stronger than their enemies. Not today. The Allied fleet moved like a single organism. Human commanders coordinated with Lithvari strategists. Symbiont hive ships shared targeting data with Calderan fortress vessels. Species that had never met before this day worked together as if they had trained for years. In a way, they had. 3 centuries of human diplomacy had created something new in the galaxy, a network of trust. When humanity asked for help, their friends had answered, And those friends had brought their friends, and those friends had brought theirs. Until what had started as a desperate plea had become a coalition, the likes of which the galaxy had never seen. Admiral Catherine Monroe stood on the bridge of the Remembrance, watched the battle unfold. Her flagship was at the center of the Allied formation, coordinating the movements of 23,000 ships from 100 different species. "Status report," she said calmly. "The Kreth front line is breaking," Commander Grant reported. "Their formation is fragmenting. They are not used to fighting a coordinated enemy." Catherine nodded. The Kreth had always relied on overwhelming force. They would arrive at a world with more ships than the defenders could possibly match, and they would simply crush them through weight of numbers. They had never developed sophisticated tactics because they had never needed them. Now, facing a larger fleet for the first time in 10,000 years, they were discovering how much they had forgotten. "Push the advantage," Catherine ordered. All carrier groups launched second wave. Calderon fortress ships, advance to positions Delta through Gamma. Symbiont hive ships, prepare for mind-link assault on their command structure. The orders went out and the fleet responded. Thousands of fighters poured from carrier bays. The massive Calderon ships moved forward like mountains rolling across the void, and the symbiont vessels began their assault, reaching out with their linked consciousness to touch the minds of the Kreth commanders, filling them with confusion and fear. On the Kreth flagship, Warlord Vraxus watched his armada crumble and felt something he had never felt before: despair. His ships were dying. His commanders were screaming for reinforcements that did not exist. His careful battle plans were falling apart as enemies attacked from angles he had not anticipated, using tactics he had never seen. Warlord, his second-in-command, reported, "We have lost 2,000 ships. The Allied fleet is breaking through our center, then throw more ships at them." Vraxus roared. "We are Kreth. We do not lose." But they were losing. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Dominion was losing. The battle raged for hours. In the chaos, acts of heroism occurred on every side. A human destroyer captain named Sarah Martinez drove her damaged ship into a Kreth carrier that was about to fire on a hospital vessel, sacrificing herself and her crew to save 3,000 wounded. A Lithvari squadron held a critical jump point against impossible odds for 40 minutes, their crystalline hulls cracking and shattering but never giving ground. A Nerix hunter named Swift Shadow flew her crippled fighter directly into the bridge of a Kreth battleship, destroying its command structure and throwing the entire enemy wing into confusion. The Kreth fought with the desperation of a predator that had suddenly become prey. They had never imagined this could happen to them. They had never prepared for it. And so, when it happened, they had no idea how to respond. Slowly, inexorably, the Allied fleet ground them down on the surface of Valoria Prime. High Matriarch Eulindra watched through orbital sensors and wept. Her compound eyes glittered with tears that caught the light like diamonds. "How many?" she asked quietly. Ambassador Samuel Hayes stood beside her, his face gray with exhaustion. He had not slept in 2 days, coordinating communication between species that had never worked together before, solving problems that had seemed impossible, keeping the alliance together through sheer force of will. "We have lost about 3,000 ships so far," he said. "Maybe 40,000 beings." 40,000. 40,000 lives from 100 different species, given to protect a people most of them had never met. "Why?" Ulandra whispered. "Why would they die for us?" Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, and his voice was gentle. 300 years ago, your ancestor asked Commander Carter the same question. Why did the Valorians help humanity? Why would you give everything to strangers you had never met? He turned to look at her, and his eyes held 3 centuries of gratitude. Slendra told him that life should help life, that kindness needed no reason, that giving without expectation of return was simply what civilized beings did. He smiled, though his eyes were wet. "We learned that lesson, Eulindra. We learned it from you, and we taught it to every species we met. Every time we helped someone, we told them the story of the Valorians. We told them about the debt we owed and how we hoped to repay it by spreading the same kindness you showed us." He gestured at the battle raging in the sky above. This is your legacy. Not just humanity. All of them. Every ship up there is fighting because somewhere, at some point, they received kindness they did not expect. And now they are passing it forward. Lindra's wings trembled. We never imagined. We never thought. Neither did we, Samuel said. We just did what you taught us to do. And it turns out, kindness has a way of coming back to you. Above them, the battle reached its climax. The Kreth flagship, the massive vessel from which Warlord Varaxis commanded his forces, found itself surrounded. A dozen allied ships had fought their way through the chaos to reach it. Led by the Remembrance itself, Admiral Monroe opened a channel one last time. Warlord Varaxis, your fleet is destroyed. Your commanders are dead or captured. You have lost. Surrender, and we will grant you and your surviving crews mercy. Varaxis's face appeared on her screen. He was wounded, green blood seeping from a gash on his head, his copper scales dull with exhaustion and pain. But his eyes still held defiance. Kreth, do not surrender, he hissed. We do not accept mercy from lesser species. You may have won this battle, but the Dominion will remember. We will return. We will have our vengeance. Catherine shook her head slowly. No, Warlord, you will not. Because today, the galaxy learned that the Dominion can be beaten. Today, every species you have ever threatened saw what happens when the victims fight back. Your empire was built on fear, and fear only works when people believe you are invincible. She leaned forward. You are not invincible. And the galaxy knows it now. Varaxis screamed something in his native language and cut the channel. His flagship's weapons powered up for a final. It's a desperate attack. It never got the chance to fire. 7 allied ships opened fire simultaneously. The Kreth flagship, the symbol of the Dominion's power, came apart in a ball of fire that briefly outshone the stars. Across the fleet, a moment of silence. Then, from thousands of ships, in 100 different languages, a cheer arose. They had won. Against all odds, against an enemy that had seemed invincible. They had won. Admiral Catherine Monroe stood on her bridge and let herself feel something she had not felt in a very long time. Hope. The battle was over. The debt was paid, and the galaxy would never be the same. The news spread across, the galaxy like fire through dry grass. On 1,000 worlds, beings of every shape and size heard the story. The Valorians, a peaceful species with no military, had been targeted by the Kreth Dominion. The humans had called in every favor, every alliance, every debt. And against all odds, the United Fleet had won. The Kreth Dominion, the terror of the galaxy for 10,000 years, had been broken. It was not just a military victory, it was a revolution in thinking. For millennia, the conventional wisdom had been simple. The strong took from the weak. Empires were built on conquest. Power came from the ability to destroy. Kindness was weakness. The Battle of Valorian Space proved that wisdom wrong. In the months that followed, delegations from hundreds of species traveled to Valoria Prime. They came to see the world that had inspired such loyalty. They came to meet the gentle beings whose ancient act of kindness had changed the fate of the galaxy. They came to learn. High Matriarch Eulindra welcomed them all. Her palace, once a quiet sanctuary of art and philosophy, became the busiest place in known space. She spoke to leaders and diplomats, scientists and warriors, telling the story of how her ancestor Cylindra had found humanity dying in the void. We did not do anything special, she said, again and again. We simply helped those who needed help. We did not ask for reward. We did not expect anything in return. We just did what life should do. The visitors would nod, thoughtful. Many of them came from species that had learned different lessons. They had learned to compete, to conquer, to take before they could be taken from. The idea that kindness could be strength, that generosity could be power, was foreign to them, but they had seen what kindness had created. They had seen 23,000 ships from 100 different species, fighting and dying to protect strangers. They had seen the impossible happen. Maybe, they thought, there was another way. 6 months after the battle, representatives from 300 species gathered on Valoria Prime for a historic assembly. They came to create something new, not an empire built on force, but an alliance built on mutual aid. They called it the Galactic Compact. The founding document was simple. Members agreed to help each other in times of need, to share knowledge and resources, to settle disputes peacefully, and to extend the hand of friendship to any species that sought it. There were no requirements for military contribution, no penalties for weakness, no hierarchy of power. It was, many observers said, impossibly idealistic. It could never work. The old ways were too strong, but it did work. Slowly, imperfectly, with setbacks and struggles and moments of doubt, it worked. Admiral Catherine Monroe was asked to serve as the first commander of the Compact Defense Force, a position she held for 15 years. Under her leadership, the Compact developed a rapid response capability that could deploy to any member world within hours. She trained crews from dozens of species to work together, building on the lessons learned in the Battle of Valorian space. She retired at 77, her hair white and her body worn, but her spirit unbroken. At her retirement ceremony, she gave a speech that was broadcast across the Compact. "When I was a young officer," she said, "I learned that the Valorians saved humanity 300 years ago. I learned that we owed them a debt that could never truly be repaid. I spent my entire career waiting for the chance to try." She paused, looking out at the crowd of beings from 100 different worlds. "But I have come to realize that the debt was never really about military protection. It was about learning a different way to live. The Valorians showed us that kindness creates strength, that helping others without expectation builds bonds that no force can break. That the true measure of a civilization is not what it can take, but what it chooses to give." She smiled, and for a moment, she looked like a young woman again. "I am proud to have served. I am proud of what we have built together. And I am hopeful for the future, because I have seen what we can accomplish when we choose compassion over conquest." The Kreth Dominion, meanwhile, crumbled. Without their armada, without their ability to inspire fear, their empire fell apart. Some of the species they had conquered chose vengeance, rising up to destroy their former masters. But most, inspired by the Compact's example, chose something harder and more meaningful. They offered the surviving Kreth a choice. Join us. Learn a different way. Or remain alone. Many Kreth chose isolation, unable to accept that their entire worldview had been wrong. They retreated to their homeworld and their oldest colonies, nursing their wounds and their hatred. Perhaps in time, they would try again. But some Kreth, particularly the younger generations, looked at the Compact and saw something their ancestors had never understood. They saw species that had once been enemies, now working together. They saw weakness treated with compassion instead of contempt. They saw a galaxy being transformed by an idea some of them decided to try. 20 years after the battle, the first Kreth delegation was admitted to the Compact. They were a small group, representatives of a generation that had grown up in the aftermath of defeat, that had questioned everything their parents believed. They knelt before High Matriarch Eulindra, as Daniel Carter had knelt before Cylindra 3 centuries earlier, and asked for the chance to learn. Eulindra welcomed them. She did not speak of revenge or justice. She did not demand payment for what the Dominion had done. She simply offered them what her ancestor had offered humanity so long ago. "You are in pain," she said. "You are lost. You are looking for a new path. We can help you find it, if you are willing to learn." The Kreth representative, a young female named Cyrixel, looked up with eyes that had seen too much war and wanted to see something else. "Why?" she asked. "After everything my people did, after everything we threatened, why would you help us?" Eulindra's wings spread wide, and the light caught them like stained glass. "Because life should help life," she said. "Because kindness needs no reason. And because long ago, someone taught us that the strangers we help today may become the friends who save us tomorrow." On the human colony world of New Terra, a memorial stood in the capital city. It showed a Valorian figure with spread wings, sheltering a small group of humans beneath them. The inscription read, In 2157, they saved us. In 2457, we remembered. May kindness always find its way home. Every year on Founding Day, humans across every world gathered to tell the story. They taught their children about the Valorians, about the debt, about the battle. They taught them that strength without compassion is just cruelty. That power without kindness is just tyranny. That the measure of a species is not what they can take, but what they choose to give, and slowly across the galaxy, other species began to learn the same lessons. 500 years after the Battle of Valorian space, a new species made first contact with the Galactic Compact. They called themselves the Yenvari, and they were small, fragile beings with skin like pale paper and eyes too large for their faces. They came in ships held together with hope and desperation. Fleeing from a homeworld torn apart by internal war, they had nothing to offer. They could only ask for help. The Compact representative who met them was a human named Marcus Cole. He was young, barely 30, with an easy smile and kind eyes. He had grown up hearing the story of the Valorians. He had sworn the oath that every human swore, to pass forward the kindness that had saved his species. He looked at these strange, afraid beings huddled in their damaged ship, expecting rejection or exploitation or death. "Welcome," he said. "You are among friends. How can we help?" The Yenvari leader stared at him with disbelief. "You do not even know us. Why would you help strangers?" Marcus smiled. It was the same smile that Daniel Carter had smiled 3 centuries ago when Solyndra asked him the same question. It was the smile of someone who understood something precious about the universe. "Because someone helped us once," he said. "Because kindness should always find its way home. And because, if you are willing, you can help us spread that kindness further." He extended his hand. "Life should help life. That is the way of things. Welcome to the Compact." The Yenvari leader took his hand. Her eyes were wet with tears she had not expected to shed, and somewhere, across the vast distances of space and time, in whatever place kind souls go when their work is done, a gentle Valorian matriarch named Solyndra finally understood what she had set in motion with a single act of compassion. So many centuries before, the debt had been repaid, and in the repaying, it had multiplied beyond anything she could have imagined. Kindness had found its way home, and the galaxy would never be the same.